Hi, friends. It's Eric here, and um, I'm the host talking with famous people. Today, I'm talking about being tested, testing, testing tests, and testing, which, in that order, correlate with executors, executives, analysts, and meta-analysts, respectively. In other words, executors take tests, or are given tests, or are tested. Executives test. Analysts test tests, and meta-analysts test testing. So, for example, the Big Five justification for the Big Five is very much an analyst justification. We have tested this test, and it has passed. We know how to test things. We gather empirics, and we find out if the empirics establish things definitively over time and repeatability and stuff like that. And Big Five passes that test. Therefore, it's valid. And the reason why Big Five has, in general, sort of scientific validity in people's minds is the same reason that evolution has validity in people's minds, because the vast majority of intellectuals who sort of control or who define the discourse on intellectual subjects are analysts. They're not meta-analysts. Meta-analysts have a tendency to be lower achieving than analysts and to end up in positions of less power, because when you're testing tests, it's always going to be somewhat, at least, in a teleological frame. That is to say, we need to know this information. Is this test valid or not? We need to know it for some reason, because we need to know if this data from this test is actionable. Hi, Eric Moore. Hi, Email Anthrax. Hi, Octavio Silva. Today we're talking about executors, analysts, and meta-analysts. Your analysts are the I may have I've kind of mixed this up on a few occasions. I want to say this is definitely, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's definitely the case. These are the types for each thing. Okay, meta-analyst is MM. All your metaphysical types. Analyst is MP. Executive is PM. And executor is PP. That's the physical. They're not confusing acronyms. I'm telling you, it's easy to figure out for sure yourself if you have at least this. This is the quickest recipe to it. I could give you a more specific one right now, which I will. MM types are NI, FE, NE, TI, TI, NE, and FE, NI. Those are your metaphysical types, your meta-analysts. Okay, yeah. Well, look, it's called the PO, actually, I think. Or maybe not in Singapore. The PO is the presiding officer in a parliamentary proceeding. It's called the PO. Anyway, regardless, not relevant to this. So, your analyst types are your MPs. Your MPs are NITE, NEFI, CISI, or SE, and FESI? Yeah, FESI. There. Okay. There's your MPs. That's your INTJ, your ENFP, your ISTP, and your ESFJ. Those are metaphysical physical. Okay? Not like the cat. PP like physical physical. PP the cat has PI. If there was an extra P in there, it would be pronounced Pippi, but it's not. Okay, so your PMs, these are your executives. They include your SETI, your FINE, your PENI, and your SIFE. Okay. I will explain it all. I just want to get it down so I don't have to think about it anymore. I have it here. I can just reference it. And then lastly, your PPs are your Sarah ISFPs, namely FISE, your ISTJs, SITE, your ESFPs, SEFI, and your TESI, your ESTJs. So that means XNFJ and XNTP equal meta-analysts. Okay, and for the analysts, we're talking about your MPs. That's your INTJ, ENFP, ISTP, and ESFJ. Analysts. ESFJ, INTJ, ENFP, and ISTP. Your executives. That's your P's, then your M's. That's your ESTPs. Okay, that's why I put it here. Let's see, that's why ESTP, INFP, ENTJ, and ISFJ. Not ETNJ, ENTJ, just to clarify that. Hi, Rachel Lepalosa. Hi, Ken Kinkers and Son of a Goo. Hi, Countess. Hi, Ghost Rider. Hi, Fun Chaser. You can chase me, but you can't catch me. I'm Mr. Fun. Lastly, the executors. Your full-blown sensors. Executors are what I like to call full-blown sensors. They contracted full-blown sensing. Your ISFPs, your ISTJ, your ESTJ, and your ESFP. Full-blown sensors. Okay. So basically what I'm trying to get at here is the fundamental thing that the world needs is for the meta-analysts to come up with a metaphysical transfer and translation protocol. You know, MTTP : / make this ESFP understand me. Cognitive functions. A meta-analyst is one who tests testing. So what I would say is I'm a meta-analyst because I go, look, the Big Five is establishing its validity according to this test. Big Five people tend to be analysts, and they go, well, here's the test we use to establish whether something is legitimate. It's called science-y stuff, right? And so we've applied that test, and this is legitimate because we have enough empirical data to show that this actually is determinately, and we can establish it, right? and we can repeat it. It's falsifiable, repeatable by empirics only, except it doesn't matter if it actually links to anything explanatory. So the thing is, an analyst will say, here's the test we use to test if sciencey stuff is valid. And it passes that test, therefore Big Five is better. But what analysts typically don't do is go, okay, so why are we testing this? And what are we trying to determine? What is this test trying to tell us? How are we going to use the validation of this test? In other words, we frame up and go, is this the appropriate validation approach for this particular object of validation given our particular desired intellectual outcomes? And that's why meta-analysts will frequently have problems with analysts. If an analyst will go, here's the frame I've been given. I need to solve this problem. Right? The problem is we've got too many people cutting class. So I need to solve that problem. And then we'll come up with a bunch of strategies to coerce people into cutting less class. Well, we can have this punishment thing. We can have incentives, behaviorist shit, basically. We could look into the sources of the problem. We could try to hold parents accountable. We could that's an analyst because they've been given the frame. Too many kids are cutting class, and they accept the frame automatically and produce a solution in it. A meta-analyst goes, maybe they shouldn't be going to class then. Maybe it's the class that's the problem. Or it could be the whole idea that you group of people get to dictate where this group of people is locationally during these hours. Maybe that's the problem. And maybe your application of that ability, choice to actually exercise that power rather than to forsake it, maybe that's the problem. So that's meta-analyst stuff. Analysts go, look, it doesn't matter. All your speculation there, Eric, about this, the problem, that's the problem, whatever, it doesn't matter because I got my job. My job is figure out how to get these kids to stop cutting class. And that's all nice and well and good and nice and wishful thinking if the work could be exactly as you want it. You know, that's not what we're here to do. The fuck it's not. You know, the problem is that being a good analyst is being a bad person when you're serving the wrong frame. Not intentionally, they're not really like subject to moral critique necessarily, but if you want to actually attain a universal good, which means to say, basically not implement unjustifiable harms, then you can't just allow yourself to operate in the frame you've been handed. And this is something I've been talking about for a while without quite fully understanding the link to being a meta-analyst. This is a recent understanding for me, that part. But I've long said, you know, if you aren't aware of how the approach you're taking fits into a larger framework or meta framework that explains what the approach you're taking is an example of, and when and where and why the approach you're taking would be appropriate, and when and where and why it would not be appropriate, then you've not done the pre-work in my mind. But of course, that's what meta-analysts think. Meta-analysts think understanding the big picture is the pre-work. And analysts think understanding the big picture is a check upon their their ability to be particularist. So, okay, you know, I did come up with a great solution, which was just to kill all the kids who usually skipped school, and pretty soon we wouldn't have any left, and then we would have perfect attendance. But then I remember the big picture was you're not supposed to alienate the family of the kids that much. So I skipped that one. So for an analyst, big picture functions as a constraint. For a meta-analyst, the big picture functions as an open question or a normative matter. Like, well, what ought the big picture be? The big picture is always bigger than the frame of reference that the analyst operates in. Dislike this fool? Who? Dislike what? Me? Anyway, so right, okay. I found bacon. That's a very TE expression, right? That you say, look, we're not actually going to implement this threat very often because once people take it seriously, then we won't have to implement it anymore. And the few people who get unjustly slaughtered in the process, well, that's just the cost of doing business. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, right? So the critical thing is we can understand behavior and also dispute and conflict by understanding how these different frames of what your job is in life. If you are an executor, you think your job in life fundamentally is to pass other people's tests. And whether or not that's instrumental or absolute depends on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. So the other thing to remember is there are two fundamental frames of reference. One's external and one's internal. We've got introverted functions and extroverted functions, right? Um, so where you have Sarah Isopy, you are an executor. You believe it's your job in life to be tested and provide answers to test questions. You know, that's your you've done the right thing when it's been validated by systems external to you. Now, remember, when we're talking about your job in the world, we have to make a distinction between the external world and the internal world. The extroverted functions talk about two different ecosystems. One of them is a metaphysical ecosystem, and one of them is a physical ecosystem. And the difference is this. When I act metaphysically, I'm using the physical world as a medium, as a passage to get to the palette upon which I make impacts. So for me as an extroverted intuitor, I speak words. The air and vibrations cause this to go like this, right? I'll get to that in a second, Octavio. So what am I doing when I'm talking? I am not. Thank you, Fun Chaser. You're an excellent human being. I greatly appreciate it. I love the yellow color as well. It's really sunshiny. So basically, I'm using the physical medium to convey something to get to my area where I impact. The actual palette I'm trying to impact is not a physical palette. It's a metaphysical external palette, which is to say your perceptions. In contrast, if I'm using SE, I might still use the metaphysical modality, but instead what I'm doing is I'm saying, look, I will use extroverted intuition to attain physical impacts. Extroverted intuition is itself just a passageway. The palette itself is the physical world. So for me, it matters whether or not you've heard my words, not what happens to them once they've been heard and understood. It matters whether you hear and understand my words. If you do, I don't take any ownership about what happens in your head after the fact, because I assume if it validates on the external metaphysical plane, that is to say, the words have been heard and understood, then they can survive or die on their own merits. In other words, if the words aren't worthwhile, they will get defeated by other words. But they have been established now and understood. Now you have to deal with them on the flow. If you genuinely can't understand the words because you misunderstood them or something, and you're arguing with me, then I can never be right or wrong because we're talking past each other. So anyway, yes, what's your questions? What do the executives do then? Do they utilize the tools created by the analysts to gain power? Executives are right. They are looking for the analysts to provide them. I can't say it any better. You just said it. Not to gain power, but to direct action, direct the course of action. In other words, to go from the epistemology side of action, the epistemology side of executing things, to the action side of executing things. It's like meta-analysts in the ideal world would say, which kind of analyst should be used for a situation. Analysts would say, tell the executives what kind of processes to implement. Executives would tell the executors what to do to implement those processes. But the meta-analysts don't have that role in the society or in the world at all. And it's not anybody's fault. It's the reality that we have just now discovered and are putting together the necessary transfer protocol so that people can understand why meta-analysts ought to be have the role that they do, which specifically is cognitive functions. The reason that meta-analysts don't have the role that they have to have is because heretofore it's always been impossible to convey meta-analyst thinking adequately to people because there's not really the language implicit. There wasn't really the lexicon of words that you needed to show how things would be, how things were about relativity ultimately, and that how that didn't invalidate absolutism. So, for example, if I'm trying to explain to you why you should listen to meta-analysts with philosophy, I'm going to fail because it doesn't link to any individual person enough, and it still makes the fundamental mistake that ideas exist without an agent making arguments. And so, of course, there is no drink Mo Monster. I don't like to drink energy drinks unless you're saying drink more, comma, monster. In which case, okay, I should drink a little something. But you're saying, hey, resume drinking alcohol and become a monster, like monster up. Then I'm gonna say no, thank you. Fun Chaser, let me tell you, you really found fun today with that super chat. That super chat was a homing pigeon with a heat-seeking missile attached to it, and the only heat source in the world was fun. Okay, so John Epstein, right? This is an individual who's here to be spiteful towards me and to try to convince me that to try to impact me negatively, ideally do some harm to me, and definitely, no matter what else, no matter what, not listen to me. And this is an example of, so John Epstein is somebody who's probably an executor or an executive. Executives and executors don't really care about legitimacy. They only care about the processes by which they make their decisions. So, and of course, here's the thing. When you're dealing with somebody like me, who genuinely understands not just which test we have to use, but like somebody like John Epstein, here's the deal. So you've got to be okay in and of yourself first before the power of communicative virtue can impact you. And what I am demonstrating is communicative virtue, which means I am trying to be non-normative with aspects of communication that link to ontology. Namely, I'm trying to say, no, my way isn't inherently better than your way. It's very difficult to be right and concurrently say, you are just as right as I am, and concurrently say, and you are wrong, and have an explanation that makes any sense. So almost always when you have somebody like a TINE user who's making arguments, they are advocates like analysts are. They have become accustomed to being analyst advocates. That's what school has trained all intellectuals to do, to advocate, not to actually analyze. Yeah, this is part of it. Well, I mean, it's what's inferred by the reality of the metaphysical and physical aspects. Now, what made me decide FI is physical? Well, remember, another word for physical and metaphysical could be experiential and representational. So, for example, feeling a stomach ache is experiential SI. Remembering that every time I eat onion soup, I get a stomach ache is representational SI. It's the metaphysical aspect of SI, which says I not only experience things, but I remember experiences and link them to antecedents. So, where did I put that little drink? I got a little juice thingy. I'm like really low blood sugar right now. I ate a piece of cheese, but dinner's coming up soon, so I can't really eat more than that. But I gotta find that juice. I feel like I'm gonna pass out. So FI is an experiential function foremost. It is not a representational function. In fact, it's the least representational. It doesn't matter how much I think it doesn't make sense that I should be sad right now. You know what? I don't really need that person, and I can find a replacement. And I shouldn't be sad right now. There's no reason to be sad. That's not useful at all. That doesn't change your feelings. Your feelings are experienced. They are not known as symbols, right? This thing has some fruit juice in it. My dad's cooking dinner right now, so I'm not going to eat. I already had a pre-dinner snack to tide me over. Could have been a little bit bigger. I like your pick, Eric Moore. Thanks. It's a picture of your mom's face. Oh yeah, I didn't even recognize that at first. Yeah, that's my member deep down her throat. Oh, that's why I didn't recognize her. Let's see here. I need a thingamajig to put this thing up on so that it's the right height. All right, so now let's talk about why meta-analysts heretofore haven't done a good job of meta-analysis or analysis. Why do I keep saying analysis? Meta-analysis. It's because we didn't really have the tools to understand what it was even. It's like the tools of analysis are the tools of universal communication, namely TI and FE. And TI and FE is not equipped to understand why this thing that fundamentally contradicts, it creates contradictions and doesn't seek to validate universally at all, ought to be given any universal validation. And so it's always going to be battling, saying, no, you are wrong. My TI thing makes sense. You make no sense. What makes the most sense, of course, is for a meta-analyst to say, here is the position that you're arguing, and here are the frames that it presumes. So you're presuming, first of all, that this is a matter that's appropriate to adjudicate by the universal communication metrics of TI and FE. And this party is presuming that those universal legitimization metrics are not appropriate for this, that instead they should use their subjective adjudication metrics. There are two kinds of functions. What you can broadly be called adjudication functions that include deliberation and epistemology functions. That's your knowledge functions and your thinking functions. Or, your TI and FI are your deliberation functions, and NI and SI are your knowledge functions. Those can all broadly be called your adjudication functions. And your agency functions, which are your extroverted functions, they are the reason they are agency functions rather than adjudication functions is because there's an implicit difference between judging something, in other words, making a decision, and making that decision public, because there's a fundamental stark bright line between public and private. And there's no possible way to understand how any personality manifests without understanding that their personality is a relationship between those two, relationship to those two ecosystems, public and private. Now, public has two manifestations, physical and metaphysical. Private has two manifestations, metaphysical and physical. So, for example, let's look at the attempt to prevent everybody from hearing what I'm saying. I'm going to always frame it like that rather than an attempt to silence me, because it's really an attempt to plug your ears, not cover my mouth. Anyway, so that whole line of business there, what we can understand what happened there. Becky was saying, I only want this to be operated out on the private metaphysical plane, and where I have control over your access and everybody else's. In other words, if I can only talk about it on your terms when you want to have a private conversation, and insofar as I can sustain that private conversation, then you control the narrative entirely. But the problem is, I took it when she denied me the ability to privately adjudicate it. In other words, to privately communicate back and forth about it, so that both of our presumptions were impacted somewhat this way or that way, and we would both be adjusted ontologically somewhat, and there'd be some sort of justice occur, right? Like some people would say, okay, you're right about this, you're right about that, blah, blah, blah. Because I wasn't able to do that on the private plane, I'm not being an extroverted intuitor means, can I extrovertedly intuit inside of my head? Yes. I don't have to use extroverted intuition on the external plane where it's most native. But the problem is, it's unsatisfying. I can think ideas in my head, but until I get them out into the world where they belong in the external metaphysical plane, it doesn't satisfy, it doesn't do anything. It's not purposeful for me. It's not rewarding at all. It's just, or it's like pre-work or whatever. So the thing is, once it's on the external plane, I assume that argument is understood sort of as on the flow, and that I don't assume everybody's heard it or knows it or whatever, but I assume that it stands in case anybody comes and says, well, here's this other idea. I say, no, it's already established, this contrary thing over here. It's well established, and here's why it's well established, and I can put all this shit together, blah, 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 right? So Becky's the same way in her thinking. The problem for her is she's operating under the false assumption that simply because it is clearly established and permanently established on the metaphysical field, that others operate on that field and internalize truths from there. They don't necessarily. In fact, the vast, vast, vast majority of people in the world, including people associated with my community, have heard only a tiny fraction of any words I've ever said about Becky or anybody else. So their internal metaphysical field does not reflect accurately the external metaphysical field that both Becky and I know experientially, which is to say the totality of all words said out loud in public about the matter. Because we don't care what you do with that once it's established on the flow. We think it doesn't matter really what you do with it once it's established on the flow. And as a consequence, for her, the damage is done because the flow is established clearly now, definitively. And so she has to assume that everybody just goes with that. They don't, obviously. Most people don't go with that. And most people have no idea what arguments have been made. And most people have no idea what the determinate qualities of the argumentation are. And see, that's meta-analysis of another meta-analyst who's doing analysis instead of meta-analysis. And when I keep saying why I'm saying you're a meta-analyst. You stop this bullshit advocacy-based analysis. You're not an analyst. And she does, but the thing is, it's like there's some sort of hurt or pain or whatever that, because being a meta-analyst requires trust. Like, well, here, I'll just lay out for you what actually is happening here ideationally. You're arguing this with this frame of mind, you're arguing this with this frame of mind. I don't need to take a position on it because I'm assuming you guys can be trusted to deal fairly with the truth about the matter. I don't need to advocate any position about it. I just need to describe it and explain it accurately to everybody and say, therefore, there's not really any meaningful reason in trying to advocate against each other like this. You might as well just, whatever you want to do. I don't know. Eric, stop overloading on your SCTI. It's scary. What do you mean SCTI? I don't have it. This isn't SCTI. This is NETI. Well, it's my long time work in the study of analysm. Analysm is what happens when, after you analyze a given system and set of vectors, then you put the system and those vectors up your butt. That's analysm. It's an advanced form of analysm. Who's an HP? Who around here is? No, you're not a real HP. Wait, oh yeah, I am. I am a real HP. I keep forgetting if I'm baking it or not. The ENFPs fit as analysts. ENFPs would be analysts, yes. Well, here's the thing. I kind of wish I hadn't picked those names exactly, because they have a lot of connotations. I kind of like MPs, PMs, and PPs better, but the thing is, exactly the idea of it is that they don't try to well, I mean, the thing is, they use their particularist tool function to try to validate something on a universal frame. That's what it means to analyze, as opposed to execute. To execute is to take something that seems to validate on a universal plane and make it pay for you. But most importantly, the biggest difference is that your executors and your executives love coleslaw, whereas your analysts and your meta-analysts hate coleslaw. And the number one reason amongst meta-analysts and analysts for hating coleslaw is mayonnaise. Did everyone see my state was hit with a devastating tornado last night? I had no idea. No. I mean, I saw Isaiah in the live stream earlier. I talked to him in the live stream earlier today, but I had no idea. Are you okay? What's his mom? Mm-hmm. Executive, executor, mayonnaise lover. Yeah, I agree. Some coleslaws are delicious. Some coleslaws do have mayonnaise, some don't. I gotta smoke this cigarette, and I promised, I think it was Horse Mumbler maybe, that I'd smoke it with my pee hole. You know, because I was explaining to him how I have a special organ up near my prostate that allows me to actually inhale and exhale through my penis. In case I have to hide underwater and pretend that one part of me is a reed in the water and breathe through that tube, I just use my penis. It's got its own set of gills. Well, they're kind of like the lungfish. They're halfway between gills and lungs. They're lily gums. Okay, so I wanted to talk also about like language and the way that language gets smushed down by people who don't need to make the distinctions within their own frame. So, like the word arbiter is the source of the word arbitrary. An arbiter in ancient Greece was just a judge. An arbiter was somebody who judged the case. So they said it was, when they said that a given thing was arbitrary, what they were saying is this matter is up to the judge's discretion. He doesn't have to justify his decision by linking it to anything else, any third thing. Just him and his feelings or whatever else, whatever his reason. That because it's an arbitrary matter, the judge gets to use his discretion rather than having to justify himself. Now, nowadays, arbitrary typically means one of its meanings is a necessary variable to set, but not a relevant variable in the determination of something. So it's like, to say that the kids were seated alphabetically, you could also say they were seated according to they were seated arbitrarily. The seating chart is arbitrary because it just uses alphabetizing rather than some reason. You might say that that such a seating chart would be orderly according to a system and validates according to a system. In other words, it could be wrong. Wait, no, Carlton, you're in the wrong seat. You shouldn't be between Zeekers and Tyson. That makes no sense. Get over there next to the B's and the D's. So, in other words, you can validate the correctness of any individual student where they're sitting against a standard, which would make it non-arbitrary in the old understanding of the word. Because to be arbitrary means to only have to be justified according to subjective considerations, namely, the judge gets to use their discretion. But that's referred to as arbitrary nowadays because it's thought that the idea that a given seating chart would be done, it's always done for either a teleology or it's not done for any reason. I mean, that's the truth, but it's like, I'm doing a bad job of explaining this. Let me think for a second. So basically, the current understanding of arbitrary says if it doesn't link to a specific desired outcome, then causally, then it's arbitrary. Of course, the decision as to whether or not Bobby should sit here or there is not an arbitrary decision because it's not a discretionary decision. What people mean when they say an alphabetized seating chart is arbitrary is that the test they have used to evaluate the legitimacy of every individual student's seat could have discretionarily been assigned any number of other things with the same fundamental effect, namely a random distribution if you don't have the key. We can also think of it in terms of playlists on YouTube. When I order a playlist on YouTube, most recently added or least recently added or whatever, I could say to somebody, oh, no, the order of this is arbitrary. It doesn't mean anything. What I mean there is I didn't individually select the order for artistic reasons or because of the way that they link to each other contextually or something like that. I chose a default way of ordering them that doesn't consider their quality at all or their relationship to each other or context or me, but just some factor that's not relevant to why you're listening to the playlist. In other words, one thing that nobody ever does is like, well, I like to listen to the songs in the order in which they were produced historically. I like to listen to the oldest song first and move closer to the newest song. The reason is because that's a very weak NI link. You might choose to organize them SI style, which song I discovered first, and that would make more sense because you'd be saying these I have the most familiarity with and these less, and familiarity is an implicit value to SI. Well, and see, this is the thing. Of course, C.S. Joseph is doing well and growing because he's being an executive of some sort or an executor. He's like he's probably an executor. If he's not, he's definitely an executive. He's not an analyst or a meta-analyst, that's for sure. He's probably an executor. So what does an executor do? They pass the tests. They give answers to test questions. They expect themselves to be tested and to, here's the answer. But in order for them to be effective, does not require them to be right. I can execute a course that does in fact generate impacts, but if I'm not using the right test to validate those impacts, then it's likely to produce something like C.S. Joseph. So he's not testing. He's definitely an executor. He's got to be an executor because he's not testing. He's answering. He's giving answers to tests. He thinks his job is to already have the answers and to give them. That's the executor's thoughts of life. The executive goes, my job is to tell the executors what the answers are. In order to tell them what the answers are, I need to know what the right answers are. So I'm now up here in the decision-making aspect of things rather than just the doing aspect of things. But I recognize, because I'm an executive and not an executor, that I don't necessarily know best about everything based on just what is now. So I seek guidance from analysts who can provide me universal resonance about my particular shit. Executors never even consider that maybe they should factor in the analyst's perspective on things themselves at all. They always figure that that's the executive's job. The notion that an executor would even dream of factoring in the meta-analyst perspective on things, if the meta-analyst tries to communicate meta-analysis to an executor, he will go nowhere. This is what happens every time I try to talk to my dad about, okay, but let's frame up, Dad, and remember what are the possible ways we can understand why we're doing this thing, and which frame. He's just, Eric, I don't want to argue about it. I'm not trying to argue. There is no metaphysical, there is no meta-analyst to executor transfer information protocol. There's no, metaphysicians text transfer protocol. : / listen, executors, hear my words. They can't understand them. The Rosetta Stone that will allow meaningful communication between types of people who are not right next to each other. Like, meta-analysts can talk to analysts because they share enough common ground that they can get their points across somehow. And they will never prioritize the same thing. Analysts will always go, okay, yeah, I can see what you're saying here, but ultimately we can't look. But ultimately, I need my tool function, and that's particularist. So quit being up here with the non-particularist shit forever, because we got it. The non-particularist shit is just there so we can collapse and turn it into utility in the instrumental physical function. And the meta-analysts go, no. The whole point is, I want you to understand that you're converting into the physical function, and when and why to do that. So it's willful rather than automatic. That's the meta-analyst position. And heretofore, meta-analysts haven't even understood their own position because we didn't have the lexicon of language to place ourselves in the equivalent position of everybody else, since we couldn't quite get outside the box enough to see how our validation metric was constraining us. I will give you a test of time. What time is it if the big hand is on the 10 and the little hand is on the 4? That's my test. You're from Poop Town. I'm far from learn. I'm far from lean. I see. I didn't get that part. What does metaphysical executive mean? INFP, for example. Well, all executives are, they're not metaphysical. They're physical. An INFP is physical first. They have FI, and that's what makes them an executive rather than analyst. CS Joseph is an ENTP. Do you like an ENTP? It reminds me of ENTP as I know. Don't ask me how to. Okay, well, I mean, I won't ask you how, but I also won't put any weight in what you're saying because you're just basically saying, subjectively, I'm still going with the ENTP. And I don't really want to have to validate it on a universal metric. And that's fine. But the thing is, we know he's not an ENTP because he doesn't actually do any analysis or meta-analysis stuff. He doesn't analyze things. He is not analyzing anything. When you ask him to explain himself and he's forced to actually do any analysis, he busts down to, well, you need to read the book. So in order to allow the executors to build the Tower of Babel and get us to heaven, we need the meta-analyst to create the translation tool that can let everyone else meta up too. Right. Exactly. So, and see, what we have right now are a bunch of false idols of that. Like, identity politics is a false idol of meta-analysis. It's an analyst's bastardization of what meta-analysts should be doing. They go, no, you need to challenge your frame of reference. You're racist. Without understanding that challenging the frame of reference is a kind of test that they never tested that idea itself, Okay, but how are you challenging this frame of reference? And what frame of reference are you presuming when you make this challenge, and what's implicit in that? And what does that tell us about the nature of human experience? And how does that therefore resolve the fundamental normative question, which is, like, okay, well, if Joe's right and Bob's wrong, and since they're both advocating things, and then that means normatively Joe is better and Bob's worse. Instead, what we could say is, what it shows us is that normatively, Bob has correctly applied the correct attentional manner to the correct kind of thing, and Joe doesn't yet understand how to choose the right attentional manner for the right thing, or when to defer and when to not. So it's not like an ESFP can choose to use TI in adjudicating TI questions, but an ESFP can recognize TI questions as something that they're never going to be able to do themselves and learn to happily and willingly defer on those matters. In other words, they can still have a more aware frame, and it can be converted into the kind of straight up descriptive identification frame stuff that your full-blown sensors use. Like, everybody has to have some sort of frame of reference, but the difference is whether or not you want to get typed by me. Lobo, L Lobo writes in caps. Eric, I want to get typed by you. Send me money. Yeah, send me money. My email address is stuartshire@gmail.com. I can't do it tonight because I work at 8 o'clock, and it's almost 6. I'm going to have dinner in a little bit. You can go look at that schedule-y thing there. Yeah. And you don't have to be on the schedule. You can tell me, I like this time of day, and it's done. It's not one on the schedule. It's probably fine. I just have on my schedule right now, tonight and tomorrow night I'm busy, but so yeah, thanks, Octavius Silva. You really are helpful. That's some TE helpfulness there or something, or SETE. It's like that's probably NFP version of SE. You can email me. I don't want to email me, really. Just call me or something, or text me. I don't know. Are you local? I mean, are you in the United States? 626-615-8751. 626-615-8751. Oh, you're in Belgium. Okay. Then, yeah, just email me. Or, yeah, just email. I don't know. I don't really want to check my email because I'm always afraid, like, there's going to be some email I don't want to see. I'm playing email phobia right now. But I will check it. I'll check it. Never mind. I'll check it. You email me. I will check my email. I have to go to work anyway, so I might as well just check it when I sit down there. Preach Sista sounds like a variant of an alcoholic beverage called a peach twista. Peach twista. My favorite food is the same as my favorite number, cheese. My favorite food is the same as favorite number, cheese. All right, so anyway, we were talking about things, and I want to continue talking about them. So this notion of arbitrary, right? The idea that something is howdy. Is it Winston's mom? Hi, Winston's mom. How are you doing? I'm well. I'm live streaming right now. Okay, cool. That's great. It's great to hear your voice. You don't sound like what I expected you to sound like at all. You sound much more. I expect you to sound more squeaky. You're not very squeaky at all. Yeah, you don't squeak. Yeah, okay. I'll keep that in mind in the future. Okay, thank you for calling me, Winston. I'm going to put your name in my phone so next time I know who it is if you call me. Okay? All right, talk to you later. Bye. 1, 2, 3. I just put my phone number in the thing. I'm going to put Winston's mom's name there in that under my contacts. Add to contacts. Create contact. Weinstein's mom. Oh, yeah. Thanks for calling me, Winston's mom. I feel like an important person who receives calls from people from the internet. Like, hey, this is the internet. We're impressed with your work, sir. And we want to give you internet validation. That's my favorite kind of validation. I love internet validation. This typing session is for every cab. It's up to you. Anytime anybody pays for a typing session, they decide whether it is published or not, or whether they even recorded it or not. I always ask first thing, do you want me to record it? If so, I can either publish it or I can share it with you by Google Photos. It's up to you. My Google Drive, you know. So yeah, I don't expect people to necessarily record or whatever, you know. You got to go for dinner. I'll be gone for dinner before you get back for sure. Thank you for catching the next exciting episode. Because let me tell you, boy, the next episode is going to be so exciting. I got some serious excitement planned. It's going to be first, I'm going to have suspense, then an exciting conclusion to the suspense, then I'm going to build more suspense, then I'm going to have a denouement, and then I'm going to have a peak and a climax and more suspense. That's how exciting it's going to be. Non-stop, 1 million times exciting boom. Yeah, take your time thinking about whatever. I get it. It's like whether or not you spend $100 on something has very little to do with whether or not that thing's worth $100 or whether or not it makes sense for you to spend $100 on it. Like I am going to get at some point an external compressor. Like so, my mic. I'm always forgetting to be mic aware. So that means I put it over there, moved it over there because it was inconvenient here for a second, and forgot to move it back. And now the cords are all wrapped around it, of course, because fuck TE, you know. And so anyway, now here it is, mic's right here, and it's probably a lot louder than it was before. Or if it's not, then it's doing some sort of auto compression thing, which I'm trying to figure out how to stop it from doing that. Certain apps do it, and I can't seem to stop them. Anyway, if I had an external compressor, that would solve this issue. And it's something that's well worth getting, and it probably costs about $100. And I've been thinking about getting it for a long ass time. I still haven't gotten it. Of course, yesterday I went and spent $150, $160 on weed without even thinking twice about it. Why? Because objects, physical objects. It's always like, do I really want to take on another physical object? I already have too many physical objects. You know how there's shiny ways. There's shiny, glossy ways try to fool you into taking possession of them and then you're responsible for them. God, physical objects. The blue names have reigned for too long. No more wrenches. No more wrenches. Hambone, I'm very impressed with your progress in this revolution. I'm shockingly impressed. I love the idea of it in general, too. I like the egalitarian, mushy egalitarianry of it. Hambone is a very interesting person. And it's like I've never been, in general, it's weird how, I feel like I know Winston's mom pretty well, but I just actually spoke to a human being that links to that name for the first time ever right now. But I certainly feel like I've interacted with Winston's mom a lot of times prior to that right now. I have no way of establishing that for sure. It could be that Winston's mom called is different than the person who's typing here claiming to be that Winston's mom or vice versa. But point is, there's no reason to go through, and a lot of people go through the internet distrustful of that because there's not a clear, obvious, definitive, empirical link between a name and a person or whatever. But the fact is, I always think of the link being between a voice and a person anyway, not a name and a person. And I think the voice is the thing that matters, not the person, really. So this is a perfect environment for me because if the voice is the same, the person is the same, and it doesn't matter if I can see you there or not. I know the person based on their words, not, yeah. What's Hambone's right idea? Oh, the revolution? Is Dance Dance Revolution? I agree. Only 2 people here have heard my voice. Hangintier, I hear you occasionally. I know that something's going on with you right now, and you're getting talked to about moisture stuff, which I appreciate. You're talking to you about moisture stuff. Whatever's going on, I'm not sure, but you have my wholehearted. There you go, Hangintier. Use it as you see fit. You have that, okay? And that's a lot. It's a little bit a lot. WhatsApp, I think I used to have it on my other phone. I did. I remember why I had it on my other phone. I got it because I wanted to have it so I could more easily talk to Becky. That's right. She lived in Canada at the time. What is your mental image of you like, Bacon? I mean, I don't have any mental image, really. I picture Zandy as looking like the girl who works at the Winchells. Don't worry, Zandy. She's pretty sexy. Boom! She's boom up here with the big boobs, and it's kind of like helpful SFJ Mexican face. Now, I'm not saying you're an SFJ, Zandy. I'm just saying, there's nothing insulting about the comparison between you and the girl who works at Winchells, especially since I don't know at all what you look like. I'm just saying that's what I imagine you looking like. What's your other phone numbers? I don't have any other phones number. Oh, that phone doesn't work anymore. All other wrenches are retracted. Octavia Sill, you hear the word? I'm gonna give Hambone one last moderator power on his way out the door, and that is the power to remove Octavio Silva's wrench. That way, if you want to blame somebody, blame Hambone, not me. Okay, Hambone, good job. You're taking all the faults here. I appreciate that. Whew. There, I could remove his wrench finally without getting in trouble, thanks to Hambone. Well, you take it up with Hambone. He's the leader of your revolution, okay? You're the one who voted socialism. And blame Hambone. It's not my fault. Okay? I'm a meta-analyst. I don't have any advocacies. I just, roll with it like this. I'm rolling right now. I don't normally take actions, so it took up a lot of gumption to take the one action to remove that wrench. I don't think I can muster enough motivation to actually do another action, like put the wrench back. That would take twice as much energy, at least. How do you spell Angelo's? Like that. That's how you spell Angelo's. Angelo's bag was filled with Italian food. Angelo, however, was not Italian, but he had an Italian name. The end. It's my short story. Do you like my short story? You're an angel? You're an archangel. You're an archangel? Are you sure you're not a parched angel? Just thirsty a little bit? It might be that. Oh, Los Angeles. That's Angeles. Angel ES. Los Angeles. Los Angeles is angel, and then just an ES after it. Yeah, it's spelled with fewer vowels than you'd think, You really would think Angeles would not just be Angel ES, that it would have more vowels in it, but it doesn't. Octavio Silva, listen, I've got your wrench still here in my pants, and it's keeping me warm. I want you to take some solace in that reality, okay? Who's another phone thing here? Somebody's phoning me of some sort. I'm having phone problems. Phone noises occurring. Jeff's mom. Confirmed. Yeah. Just like that. Yeah. I just want a wrench that I can feel like I'm playing Rachel and Clark, Rachel and Clue, Rachel and Clark, Ratchet and Clark, Ratchet and Clank, Lewis and Clark, Lewis and Clark, and Saskia. No, that's Jeff's mom. Jeff is my client, my kid, my debater. And his mom is in my phone as Jeff's mom. And Jeff's dad is in my phone as Jeff's dad because they both have Chinese names. And even though they said them to me a million times, I just sort of tune them out. So I don't have to learn any names with sounds that I'm not familiar with. This is Shui. Okay. You mean Jeff's mom? Okay, cool. Hi, Jeff's mom. Ratchet and Clank are like Lewis and Clark of the ghetto. Wrenches are cold. Don't keep them in your pants. Well, I need to loosen my lug nuts. The reason I keep a wrench in my pants is I need to loosen my nuts. All right, I got 5 minutes before dinner. I need to spend that full 5 minutes pulling bowls. At the end of it, I will say goodbye to you. In the meantime, I'm not going to be able to talk much because I need to really be focused here and smoke as much pot as I can in the next 5 minutes. This is a problem area for me because I like to talk a lot. I promise I just keep talking and put up lighting the bowl or whatever. Before you know it, I got to go in, and I haven't even smoked any weed yet. What's an example of validating universals? Well, it would be like, something's TE sound, it's universally valid. Whether that makes it true or not is a different question. Whether it works as a whole is NI universal valid. Here's the thing with Mom, I hope you put enough in. If you don't put enough in, you don't. It's kind of like psychedelic drugs. If you take like 50 milligrams of LSD or something, you might not feel anything. But if you take 100, you'll feel like a shit ton, right? Or not 100, it feels like micrograms or something like that. Anyway, the point is, you don't really. It's a kind of like an escape velocity thing, Winston's mom. Escape velocity, okay? No matter how high you throw the ball up into the air and how hard you throw it, if you don't reach escape velocity, it comes back down to Earth. Same thing with coffee creamer. If you don't put enough in, it's not better than some other means of creaming it. It only becomes better once it reaches maximal, critical mass, or super collapses from superposition. Ooh, nice search terms, big boy. Are you flirting with me, Google? I have a boyfriend. Thank you. Oh, I see I only got 3 minutes left. I see that. Thank you. But the point is, I could easily see somebody being skeptical of non-dairy creamer if they put just a little bit, not enough in, Like, yeah, okay, well, it's fine. I don't really see anything for a big busting. But the right amount, though, to put enough, you get past critical mass. You go, oh, this is a whole new ballgame. I see now. Just as if you stir a bunch of salt into liquids at, I guess, a low temperature or a high temperature. What is the generalized definition of the amount or percentage to definitively escape velocity? Okay, well, what I'm saying is it relates to binary and sliding scale, which are kind of qualities implicit to systems. So gravity, or Earth's orbit, is a binary system in that regard. If you either have enough velocity to escape the Earth's gravity, or you will always pull back to it. If you don't have enough, it's the same as having none. That's the quality I'm talking about here. And in the end result, it's the same as having none. If you don't have enough strength to throw it out of the Earth's atmosphere, then it's the same as just leaving it on the ground. It's going to come right back down to the ground. I'm playing what? Favorites? Who am I playing favorites with? Why do you like kicking and slapping so much? Who's kicking and slapping who? Octavio Silva, will you stop making me feel guilty? You have to be an INFP. You have to be. Only INFPs do this shit. They successfully make me feel guilty. Look at that face. Look at that INFP meowdy mess. That's what I call. See, FI people think FI people are manipulative. Your genuine emotions are more manipulative than my made-up emotions could ever be, Octavio. Okay, fine. And now I've got Winston's mom and Hambone in direct opposition to them and to each other. Now what do? My two key advisors are conflicted. Hambone's like, look, let's limit this to just two. Rachel and Winston's mom, making one exception, not two. And Winston's mom's like, oh, come on, make another exception. I'm siding with Hambone on this one. It destroys the whole point. He's already stretched it to have two. And he did it specifically with Winston's mom because she does have special status around here. That's not playing favorites. It's a descriptive reality. Listen, Octavio Silva, if there were to be a third person, it would be you who's most deserving. I use your fucking tarot guide all the time. You cut and paste shit for me all the time. Actually, I just talked myself into it. All right, Octavio Silva, I need you more than I need Hambone's revolution. Sorry, Hambone. You lost on TE. I know it sucks. It's not a good reason to lose. Oh, don't. Now you're going Effie on me? Effie attack? He's calling me pathetic. That means he's challenging my manhood. Okay, I'm sorry, Octavia. I gotta take it away. I just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Keep taking it away. No, I can't make Hambone that mad. I'm sorry, Octavia. I can't make Hambone that mad. I gotta take your wrench away again. You just have to live with that. Hambone, I can't. Octavia keeps yelling at me. I have to give him his wrench back. Good stuff. There's my dad. See, I didn't smoke enough weed when I was supposed to. You guys didn't tell me to either. You guys didn't remind me. I agree. Octavio, listen, here's the thing. Hambone, you provided the most negative utility, which is to say, you were my hockey team enforcer and most reliable to both be a good enforcer and have discretion about it. Octavio, however, was the team mom. He was always bringing cookies and shit. Now, I don't mind getting rid of the enforcer duties by and large, but I still want cookies. See what I'm saying? All right, I gotta go. Talk to you guys later. Bye. Thanks for being here. Don't be. I'm glad you.